All right. Well, welcome everybody back to another episode of Marketing Hops, where we share some pints and perspectives on B2B sales and marketing and the landscape around there. It's super excited to have Christy on with us today. Unique background and career journey, focus on healthcare, a lot of cool stuff to get into here. But first off, Christy, welcome. What are you choosing to sip on today during our chat?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited. Okay, so it's a different kind of hops. I'm a cider
Oh,
girl, and this
all
one I
right.
was in for the other day and thought this looked really neat. It's by B Nectar, and it's called the Dude's Rug.
Huh.
And
Never heard of that one.
I also tend to be a tea girl, not so much a coffee girl. And this one is a hard cider with tea and chai spices.
Oh, all
So,
right. All right.
but it
Well,
sounded interesting.
I'm sticking with the good old favorite Elysian Super Fuzz here. It's a good blood orange one, easy drinking. So, with that, I'll get this guy open and cheers, and let's
Yeah.
dive in. So, if my notes serve me right as we were going through this in our pre-conversation, you've had an interesting journey, kind of how you came into marketing. If my notes serve me right, you were started a record label. Like, talk me through that. How did you get from there to B2B marketing?
Sure. So I moved to Nashville in the 90s. And like everyone else, wanted to be in the music business. And I learned right away I wanted to be in the business of music. And I finished my degree at Belmont, and I was actually a music major. So I played music since I was like 3 years old. I played the saxophone, I played piano, I was in choirs, and music was really my life. And so I, right out of school, got a job at a record label right off of Music Row, and I was doing the front desk plus selling studio time and calling radio stations trying to get our artists on the radio. It was a small label, but within about a year and a half, um, unfortunately, the IRS came and shut them down. But there's also the time where digital music was becoming really popular. So you probably
Mm,
remember Napster and the
hmm.
MP3s and MP4s. And there was a lot of discussion in Nashville about how to prevent people from essentially stealing music and how that was going to happen. And I can remember thinking, oh, this is going to take off like crazy. I was seeing what was happening with Napster, people sharing
Hmm.
music, and I was like, this digital music thing is not going to die. So myself, along with a lot of people, a lot of labels started shutting down. Um, very briefly for like a month or two, went to the one across the street. They shut down too. And so I'm like, okay, might want to think about something different here. I
Something
was
else.
young, fresh out of college. I had bills to pay. Um, and I got in touch with a headhunter who called me up one day and said, hey, I have this job at this healthcare software company. And she was describing it to me. And to be honest, I was like, that sounds terrible. That's not that cool. But when she told me what it paid, which I think was like $25,000 a year, my eyes lit up, and I'm like, I think I can do that. I can make that work.
Manage that.
Um, and the rest was kind of history. And that first company is today known as MedHost. Back then, it was Healthcare Management Systems, HNS for short. And I was there almost 11 years. So yeah, it kind of happened by happenstance, really.
That's funny. So, obviously, healthcare software, healthcare payer providers, all that, it's a very complex space. And I know when I've talked to people about it and marketing in that space, a lot of people don't relate it to B2B marketing for a lot for various reasons. I think probably more often than not they don't really understand it. Like, talk to me about the nuance of healthcare marketing and like, and how does it differ, but then also how is it very much so the same? Because I think that there's a lot of misconceptions around that when you hear healthcare marketing.
Okay, sure. Well, just like in any other industry, I think there's a B2C side to it too, and there's a B2B side. So if you think about hospitals, health systems, physician practices, things like that, who are trying to get their message out to the community, patients, and tell them about what their services are, why they should visit their facility versus another, so on and so forth, that piece of it, right? But then on the other side of it, hospitals utilize a lot of technology in order to
Hmm.
run a lot of services. And so there's a plethora of B2B that happens to sell into hospitals, health systems, physician practices, and even into payers and insurers. And so I have started my career again at the HMS. It's now known as MedHost. Um, and they were an enterprise clinical and financial software vendor. So
Hmm.
this was right at the height of when best of breed systems were kind of all the rage, right? You had like your lab rat and pharmacy systems, and people really allowed the decisions in those facilities to be made on whatever the head pharmacist wanted, whatever the head radiologist wanted, etc. And we were bringing to market a more enterprise, all over the board, like, hey, we might not be 100% every single one of those areas, but if you could do your
Right.
financials and clinicals and bring all that together under one umbrella, you could save a lot in terms of resources, processing, etc. You know, you had hospitals and health systems with huge facilities, IT shops, city Bob Caravan. I could be in a multi-tenant situation. I could bring this all under one roof and have one price check. Um, it was very appealing and very cost effective. So the industry really made a shift there. And also there was always government legislation that pushed that too. So anytime
Mm-hmm.
CMS, the US government creates a new rule and reg around healthcare, a lot of times that impacted the buttons that a nurse had to hit or something that somebody had to report on in, clinical informatics or in the financial area in order to meet those measures. So software plays a huge role in B2B marketing. And yeah, that's what I've been doing ever since those early days.
So is it, I mean, I'll get very tactical here around tactics, which is like, does traditional ABM work when you're targeting a bunch of these different practices that are out there or hospitals? Like, do you have to change it up because of how and who you're selling to, or is there a lot of similarities between them?
You know what? It's tougher today than it's ever been. I mean,
Hmm.
there are thousands of messages hitting your head C-suite inside these hospitals and health systems every single day. You know, it's the ability to capture mind share in a digital space is beyond what I think any of us could have ever imagined it would be sitting here in 2024, right? I mean, when I first went to college, I didn't even have a computer. So, people were just getting personal cell phones and things. So the explosion of technology. But, I can remember talking to a CIO a couple of years ago, and he's like, I literally get several hundred people calling me and/or emailing me every single week trying to sell me something. So yes, ABM is extremely important. Like knowing your buyer personally, professionally, what's in it for them, and knowing and understanding their business better than anyone else and making yourself that trusted advisor, that consultant, really, that's what people are looking for. Not just somebody who's ringing them up going, hey, so what are you looking for? Taking them through, 10, 12 basic qualifying questions. I mean, that's just a lose-lose situation today. So yeah, ABM is this crucial.
It's I was having a chat earlier today with someone who said they think generative AI is going to essentially replace the SDR BDR function just because it can potentially write better personalized emails and do the phone calling and all those kinds of things. I don't know if I'm all the way down that road yet. Just I think it enables you to write better, maybe slightly more personalized, but you still need that human element, at least in my opinion, from a lot of the writings that I've seen. And the world doesn't need higher volume of slightly better emails. They still need that curation and that bit there. So, I'd be curious your thoughts on that, but then also I'd be curious, how do you stand out? Like if they're getting 700 calls and emails a week from different vendors, how do you actually break apart? How do you stand apart in that ecosystem amongst all that noise?
Yeah, great question. I think, it's hard to tell what AI is going to be. I can remember a year ago, Thanksgiving, first logging in and getting on the wait list for ChatGPT. And
Hmm.
now here we are a year and a half later. I couldn't have even imagined the things, it could do. So I can't even imagine 5 years from now. It could potentially replace it. I think it could get good enough that it could. But I think the thing that people will create in that digital space is the value of a human touch. And so
Mm-hmm.
personally, what I see again, especially when you're dealing with C-suite, people who are experienced, who have been in their role for a long time, who really are experts in their field, right? You have to be the expert in your field. And I really think there's going to be this resurgence, and I think we've already seen it, of these face-to-face association types of meetings where people
Hmm.
are curating custom groups of people to get together on a regular basis and talk about the problems and issues that face them. I mean, you know, take a look at a marketing coffee talk group that
Hmm.
some of us are a
Yeah.
part of. You know, getting together with other experts to hear, hey, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about that? I think that's going to um, remain and grow in relevance as we continue down this AI path.
I think one of the big struggles will be how do you as a brand facilitate those types of interactions and have it come across as authentic versus having an agenda, as you
Yeah.
go through that, right? If everything ends in a pitch, or whatnot, are you missing the mark? I would argue you probably are.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a lot of pressure on marketers to do that, though, right? How do you prove the ROI of facilitating community? Um, Definitely an interesting vein on that one, but I don't disagree on that at all.
Well, I mean, I think first and foremost, authenticity is going to be really important. I mean, for lack of a better way to say it, you're not gonna be able to bullshit your way through it. You
No.
know? Uh, you have to know your stuff, you have to know the industry, you have to know their business better than they even know their business, right? They're in it every day, just like whatever we do every day, we're in it every day, and sometimes that outside perspective shines a new light in an area that they hadn't thought of. I don't think every conversation or meeting needs to end in a pitch, quite frankly.
Hmm.
I think you have to get to know a person and establish trust, it's kinda like, you know, typically, with me, most people don't show up on a first date and go, "Hey, let's go get married." I mean,
Yeah.
I think it happens in
Listen
Vegas,
to
but outside of that,
that.
you can date someone for a while, right? And you get to know them, and they get to trust you, and you have to build that trust. And people, I think, are really good at seeing through the BS and looking
Hmm.
for authenticity, and people who aren't, quite frankly, trying to pitch them every 5 seconds, but genuinely are there to help them when they have a problem or issue that they need to solve. So I think sure you can ask some really good, interesting questions, and that's where I think marketers can constantly be having conversations with those who are out in the market on a regular basis or going to these trade events and things and talking, making sure that everybody understands what value the company or the product solution service is bringing to the table. Make sure everybody is crystal clear on that and making sure that people are educated on the industry and the latest and greatest developments. And healthcare is no joke. I mean,
Yeah.
just from a regulatory perspective, which I'll have to keep up with.
Yeah. Well, it's almost you need to have those pre-brief meetings where, a function like product marketing comes in and says, all right, like here's the pre-brief so that everybody's up to speed on latest trends, latest government
Right.
regulations, what's our point of view on that, what's, competition doing, uh, all of that nuance. Somebody has to go gather that. And good sellers, I think, create their own curated ways to stay on top of that knowledge, but at the same time, you know, a lot of them will just kind of show up with the same old pitch deck or things like that. And so,
It's
marketing,
true.
I think, has a massive opportunity to step in and be that, I call it the voice of the market, and facilitate that. But then you do have to set up those briefings and things like that. Because I think if you don't, ahead of getting these people together, some sort of regular cadence on just what's going on, let's all talk about it. It's real easy just to fall into the way I've always done it and not staying top of mind. And then you become irrelevant
Absolutely.
to the prospects.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I get those phone calls too. When I made Chief, my phone started ringing off the hook
Yep.
even more than it had before. And it's like, we're all inundated with a lot that we have on our plates and very little time, just like the ends of the gardens inside hospitals, health systems, the physician practices, insurers and stuff.
Right.
You know, get to the point and get there quick, for one. And I think people can tell very, very quickly if you know what you're talking about or not. And I know I can when I get those phone calls, and then it's just like game over. I don't have time for
Hmm.
this. Call me back when you know what you're talking about. So, and the worst is when, I've asked for a demonstration or something myself when I really am interested in the product. I've done my homework. And then they want to take me through a slew of qualifying questions, and I literally want to pull my hair out. It is the
Yeah.
worst. We have to stop that.
It's an interesting behavior that we've trained. It's like, oh, the discovery questions and things like that. But if it just feels like, a list of 20 questions that an SDR or BDR is just asking
Yeah.
you to see if you're BANT qualified or whatever,
Uh,
um, that's very different than having a discovery session that still gives value. It gives you a different way of thinking. It gives you a landscape to look at. Like, hey, people who have these problems are usually looking at these three vendors, in addition to us. Are you talking to them yet, or just with us? And just the whole way you facilitate that conversation can either just feel like 20 questions filling out a type form,
Right.
or delivering value through that conversation. And I think there's a
100%.
there's a big gap there. I don't know, AI will make up for that, honestly.
Yeah.
So,
We're
so let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned, and as you got that C title, um, phones started ringing off the hook, those kinds of things. What were some of the biggest challenges that shifted as you hit that marketing executive role for the first time? What were like the two or three biggest challenges that really bubbled up that you encountered?
Well, for me, I was kind of in the right place at the right time very early on. And when I first went to work at HMS, Healthcare Management Systems, within very short order, the entire marketing team was let go, and sales and marketing was all
Mm,
one department. So quite frankly, I never knew any different. But the person that they put, the woman that they put in charge of all of that, I just looked at her one day. I mean, just like we were doing 60, 70 trenches a year, and I knew like we were going to be in trouble, right? If we weren't doing what we needed to be doing just to get prepped for that. And I said, hey, what do you have to lose? Like, let me step in. I love marketing. I love sales. This is exactly what I want to do. Give me a shot. And she did. And I give her a ton of credit for that. And so I very quickly was sort of catapulted to a leadership level. We
mm,
had a junior leadership team, but marketing had to present numbers on a regular basis. And we're good to provide numbers. And I was invited in to the leadership team meetings to do that quite often. So very, very early in my career, and ever since I had that. So the answer to your question really is I spent so much of my career at the director level, VP level. I didn't really care about title. I was always generally in the room, key leadership, and able to sort of present my case and show where we are at with things.
mhm.
So getting an official C title, I think it's what a lot of us go through, and you get that imposter syndrome. Then it's all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, I've arrived, when it's like, quite frankly, I've kind of always been here. It's just a title change. Why am I
Right.
feeling weird or different about this? And I think there were times that there were levels of nervousness that sort of played into that was just like unfounded. And I had to kind of ask myself why. I've been at this table for years now, quite honestly. I can do this. So I think that was kind of the biggest thing is, re-energizing myself and convincing myself this isn't new, this isn't different, you got this. So that's kind of what it was for me, honestly.
Interesting. You hear a lot in CMO circles, the conversation between like the difference between a VP of marketing and a CMO. It sounds like you didn't really experience a real shift in what you were doing. I know I've heard others say, hey, that's when you shift from like, I'm running marketing to I'm looking at the broader business that happens to be in charge of marketing. Kind of a mental mind shift is a part some people have talked about, but it doesn't sound like you really face that.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is I've spent the bulk of my career working with teams that might be considered more on the small medium side. As a good team of five, and we might have an outsourced PR firm or design graphic, some
Mm-hmm.
supplemental channel partnerships. I've been lucky enough in that, I've kind of got to do it all. And so I climb up and down that ladder from, hey, we don't have enough people to get X, Y, and Z out today. So I'm writing a blog article to, I have to come up with a presentation to the investors next week, or we're doing putting the book together or a pitch. Um, I've honestly loved that because I'm bound to get my hands into a lot of different pots. So for me, if I've known of colleagues that have been a part of large marketing orgs that have 30, 40, and lots of people and lots of layers and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I haven't actually experienced like that. And yet I've been a part of orgs that, were going on the block for 600, 700 mil.
Mm.
Um, so the whole adage of, jack of all trades, um, kind of really comes into play for me, but it was just, business as usual, honestly.
Interesting. As you reflect back on your career, what is like one campaign or one hire that really stands out to you that you're like most proud of, and why?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that, and there's a couple that I can think of. So when At one organization I was at, they had been a word of mouth referral kind of company,
Mm.
which was awesome. They had a great reputation and got a fantastic solution, but they really hadn't had any spend on marketing, and they were willing to make that investment. And so we were all scratching our heads like, what are we going to do? Because we were going up some real behemoths in the market, lots and lots of money, more than people than we just should get this that. So we were like, okay, what are we going to do? And I was lucky enough to have a boss at the time who was really, really innovative and was willing to let me try things. And I just went to him with this wild and crazy idea. And said, you know what? We were getting ready to go to HIMSS, and HIMSS, was Health Information Management Society. It was one of the biggest trade shows, still is today, of healthcare in the United States and abroad.
Mm-hmm.
And they might have 800 plus vendors on the show floor. And yeah, vendors that have double-decker booths that are literally huge, couple city blocks wide and tall.
Yeah.
And it was like, we might have a 20 by 40 that we worked up to. It was like, what are we going to do? Well, we decided to just really think outside the box. How I could think of it, we went off brand to build brand eventually, right? We needed people to know who we were first and foremost. So we took those in-person sessions to not be shocking from like a provocative kind of way, but to get people talking. So we built a country music stage right on the hen show floor one year. And we brought in a lookalike that looked like Garth Brooks, and quite frankly, it was very hard to tell them apart back in the day. And so many people actually thought we had paid and had the budget for Garth Brooks, and it still makes me laugh to this day that they really thought that was him. And we sent out VIP passes in the mail for backstage passes, and it looked like it was part of like some kind of stage that was set up for a presentation at the show, right?
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, and so we did this. We gave out cowboy hats, and there was a big curtain and two giant guitars that crisscrossed in the front. But you had two big gutted pianos in the back that were like our demo stations. So they got to sit around a piano and have a drink, and the person playing was the demo person, and we just played up the whole theme. And we got so much free press out of that. It wasn't even funny. We were on HIS Talk, which is one of the big sort of media outlets that talks inside based all about healthcare on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And we had people from all the magazines and so on and so forth coming up and talking to us. And we did something unique like that a couple of years. But that particular campaign that we did all around that show and a couple of others that we did many versions of it, we ended up with like a 5-6 page spread in Exhibitor magazine. And the funny thing was, we had talked to traditional exhibit houses about what it would take to build something like that.
Yeah. Wow.
And I just happened to have a friend in the industry who does a lot of production work out of Nashville, and they had a huge prop house, and they did it for about a third of what anybody else was going to touch it for, and came in and spit it all up and built it for us just like they were doing stuff for, Garth Brooks or anybody else that day. So I think back to that, and there was this whole period of time over a couple of years where we did some really out-of-the-box things. We purposely used colors that you weren't seeing in the magazines, that you were staying on the show floors. We had a whole campaign that was Heroes of Healthcare, and we used a lot of red because you go to HIMSS or any of these other healthcare shows, and you just see a sea of blue. That's all
Blues and
it is.
greens.
In healthcare, quite frankly, from a marketing perspective, it can be rather boring. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
look and feel of it, truly. I mean, the people aren't trying to be exciting. They're trying to play it really cool. And I understand. There's a lot of, label teams and things involved. There was that period of time for 2-3 years. We did a 50s diner, I think the next year. And we had servers and booths with the old jukeboxes. They were really computer screens. And so, funny enough, we ended up building that company up to sell, and everybody made a ton of money, and it was awesome. And so at that time, anyway, we kind of had to go off brand, and then, new investors came in and bought us, and we went super corporate and tightened it all up. But at that point, everybody knew who we were. We had gotten so much free press, back covers, inside covers, the magazines, you name it. So really, I'm really proud of taking that risk. In fact, I read a blog by Barbara Cochran.
The real estate investor, right?
Yeah,
On Shark Tank.
from Shark Tank. She made a similar comment in one of her social posts here the other day saying, they didn't have a ton of money when she was starting out, and she needed to do something unique. And so she did a lot of these, wild and interesting things, just to get her name out there. And that worked for her too.
So how do you, as a CMO, as head of marketing, you said go off brand to build brand, like you're supposed to be building a brand identity and a voice and things like that. How do you find the line? How do you know what's too far? Or when you're that small, the biggest thing's honestly, like any press is good press. And so we want to be as bold and memorable and standoutish as we can. Like, how'd you
I
find that
think
line,
that's
or was there a line?
Yeah, yes, of course. There's always a line, and it's the thing that would keep you up at night. Where is the line? And we always had the professional, and we didn't want to be kitschy to the point that people thought it was cheesy. Like, we needed people to be like, hey, they're legit, and it just slowly morphed over a 2, 3, 4 year period where we got more on brand and more serious as it went along. And then that last Heroes of Healthcare age, we were using some sarcasm. Computerized physician order entry was coming on the scene, and we had a whole series of ads. The one in particular I'll never forget. It was a picture of a nurse, and she said, "I love deciphering doctors' handwriting. It's a little hobby of mine." And she like really hit off, right? We were getting people asking for posters and mugs and all these kinds of things, but they wanted to hang at their nurses' stations. Like, I think there's still room in healthcare, quite frankly, to be clever and
Yeah.
yet professional. And I've always said I think healthcare marketing is really behind pretty much every other marketing when it comes to that kind of a thing. I think we took a risk to get noticed. And then we were going, you had better be able to follow that up with having something super legit to talk about. And I was
Right.
lucky that the product really followed suit, and that we really were a legit word. It wasn't all smoke and mirrors. So I think that's where you got to be careful with that.
That's a good call out on that one. It's almost being willing to, poke fun at the category, like the hard truths, I guess you could call them, like that nurse's handwriting. I had a friend one time, they did call recording for contact centers a long time ago. And they did a whole campaign with these animated animals of basically really bad customer service conversations.
Yeah.
And so as they captured them, because they were call recorded, and like they were real customer conversations, like, anonymized enough and cut right so that they could protect the innocent, but you were just cringing at just hearing these interactions that were happening there. And I think it's an interesting thing of like poking fun at the realities that that your solution can help solve, but also it's the realities of what everybody's feeling.
Yeah.
So interesting concept on that. And yeah, healthcare, I tend to think of it as far more reserved and
Very much.
and not as bold, I guess you could say, as you go through that. But did anybody copy it? I'm curious. After the first year, did somebody else do a musician the next year?
That's a good question. I don't recall that they did. No. But we did start to see some people talk to the scene. I remember there was a software on base, and they set up what looked like a pub on the show floor right around that time, I feel like, and it looked like a sports pub. Right.
Huh.
And you could sit around the bar in the middle and the TVs and get your demos and things like that. So people did start to come out of their shells a little bit like that. Um,
You broke
and
the seal
yeah.
and started encouraging
Yeah.
it.
And they were fun. Those booths had the most traffic and the most people at them. So you could just imagine, then you're able to have a conversation and
Right.
take and show what you really have to offer. So it's late, you know, we we brought them to the table, and then it was the rest of the team's responsibility to drive it home.
So this is not a story I've told really often on any public setting, and I will hide names to protect the innocent. Um, so we had a big trade show that we were doing, and we had a partner who always threw a big party, major rager, and it was like they were known for it. Um, and so they call up and they're like, "Hey, do you want to co-sponsor this?" It's like, how much? Sure. I think it was like 10 grand or something like that. It's like, sure, we'll do that. Slap our logo up there, and it's great. I'm flying back. So I'm mid-flight. It's the evening. It's East Coast. I'm on West Coast hours, so it's a lot later there. And I'm getting text from my event person who was on site, and they're like, "Did you approve this?" I'm like, did I approve what? They're like, oh my gosh, like we need to, like, they're like, I don't know what we need to do. And they'd gone so above and beyond, like when we had talked about like the food and things, I was like, oh, we'll have sushi and this and that. Well, what they didn't inform us, so again, we can plead negligence on not knowing, but it's also one of the things I've learned to ask the detailed questions afterwards. They had human sushi
I
at the
do.
event,
Yep.
and not at all on brand for us. Not like above and beyond, and they ran out of it too. So like there wasn't enough food to feed
Whoa.
people. So everybody's like looking and paying attention to this stuff, and it was one of those you're just like, oh, that's what, like, am I going to get fired for this? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So we had to have a whole like internal sync up on that, and that very much so set some ground rules that we followed there from there on out. But also for me personally, I've always learned to ask the detailed questions. It's like I trust them, this and that, but give me a run of it. Who are the
Right.
vendors? And you're looking for all those little gotchas that are out there because somebody else's brand may not, especially in the partner ecosystem, maybe they're willing to do something a lot more than
Sure.
you're willing to do. And so
Like you
kind of
said,
trying
there's
to find
always a
that.
line.
Yeah.
You
That
gotta
was
really know
across
where.
it, and we didn't know about it. So
But
that
that
was
was
one of mine.
up easy in Vegas, no doubt.
This was in Florida, so not Vegas. So of all places, but yeah. But so you commented on it that there's still a lot of space for this authenticity, this kind of these experiences that stand out a little bit. I'd be curious as you look at marketing today, like what are the biggest challenges that you think are in the next, call it 12, 18, 24 months that are ahead for marketers as they're looking at it? We've got this authenticity experiences, there's generative AI, there's all kinds of things coming at marketers' way. What are you seeing as the biggest challenges?
I think our biggest challenges is remaining relevant and proving our worth inside of our organization.
Mm,
I think there can be a misconception that maybe AI might replace a lot of what we all do, or at least portions and pieces of it, right? So, like I heard someone say the other day, and I think this is really rings true. Constantly making sure that the powers that be know the worth that you and your team are bringing to the table is really critical. Whether they're asking for a report or not, put it together, right?
hmm
They say, hey, this is what we've been able to do. This is what we've accomplished. This is the value that we're bringing to the table. And then I also think one of the reasons that I love marketing and I've always been so drawn to it, I'm not the kind of person that likes to do the same thing every single day, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm not just punching a card kind of thing, doing the exact same thing. It's always changing. And so for me and my personality, I love that. And I think for those who like sameness, it's not going to bode well going forward. It already hasn't, but especially in this new world, being willing to constantly learn,
Yeah.
being a voracious a learner, trying new things, iterating constantly, testing constantly, and letting data drive decisions. So I really think that's what it's going to boil down to.
Be curious to unpack your relevance. Like, what does relevance mean? I think before we go there, you hit on it, which is this constantly learning. Um, I've always challenged my teams to be transformational, which means just because we've done it a way doesn't mean that we should.
Right.
And ideally, your teams are proactively reading the latest research, things from like Matt Dixon or April's frameworks or, all the different books and things that are coming out there all the time. There's always new things and your competition's always doing things and you should be just that sponge. But what I found, and it's probably the hardest cultural thing to change as a marketing leader, you can't teach curiosity. Some
Mm.
people are naturally curious. They want to learn. They want to come up with solutions. They want to explore. Other people just want to punch that card. And it is one of the hardest things because they might do their job every single day, check all the
Mhm.
boxes, right? But they're culturally not what you're striving for. And I'd be curious if you've seen that at all. Like to me,
Yeah.
I've never been able to teach curiosity in someone, something to hire for desperately. But if you inherit a team that lacks a lot of curious people, it can be a huge uphill battle.
Yeah, well, look, I think one of the things that I learned really early on is to get to know my team personally and professionally. What do they love to do? What makes them tick? And I have, on a pretty regular occasion, regardless of what role and title they've had when I've come in, I tend to be able to figure out pretty quickly what that thing is that they really love to do, what makes
Yeah.
them light up and they can talk about all day, every day in a meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then have the conversations of, I really see that you tend to love X. What if we kind of rearrange the roles here and let you work in the capacity that you work best? I don't think we should
Yeah.
be teaching fish to con juice, for example, like the old adage says. I think if you take this thing that people are so really, really good at, so you have to have the curious people who are constantly testing, trying, iterating,
Yeah.
but you have to have those steady people too, who like to dig into the numbers, who, like you said, want to work in an Excel spreadsheet or what have you, run the same report every week, do that same up. It's having a very well-rounded team of people who all that old saying, having the right seats on the bus. The people surrounding yourself with a team that all likes to do the different things that you need to have done.
Right.
So they can't all be curious. They can't all be, data miners. They can't all be graphic designers. And you sure that they have people on your team who can do a little bit of everything to help, fill in when you need. Especially
Right.
when I've had teams where we've had to be scrappy and have smaller budgets and had to build it up. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in hiring people that are smarter than me in the areas that I don't love either.
Yeah.
And I see that really being a detriment to some leaders, and the ones that I have loved to work for are the ones who saw something in me that filled the gap in what they had to, and they got out of my way. And
Yeah.
that's how I like to be for my people too. Hire really good people who have a skill that you need, and maybe even one that's better than what you have. That should never be a fear that you're going to hire somebody better than you. Because if you're a curious learner, you're constantly growing and evolving, they might absolutely get to take your role someday, and they should, so that you can grow and go to the next level too.
Right. Right. And I think that's a good call. It's finding those passion areas for the
Yeah,
people on the team and capitalizing on them, because a lot of people just kind of get in the same job and just kind of chip away at it over time,
exactly.
and you gotta help stretch them. That's one of the big goals of management, to stretching people as they go through that.
Yeah, and not having a fear to rearrange when you figure out what it is that does make them tick.
Yeah.
And then that's pretty exciting to see a team where you redo some slight reworking and get them working in the area that they love the most, and they'll knock over mountains for you.
Yeah. That's a definitely good call out on that one. So this is a question I love to ask everybody. Over our careers, we've all worked with a lot of different sales and marketing technologies, but we tend to build an affinity for a couple. Like, what are your 3 must-haves in your stack today?
So, well, one, I don't think I can live without Salesforce, quite frankly. It's one of my favorite CRM, experience 2 or 3, and I've had to do some work related to that at every place that I've been. Um, And then from there, it's not necessarily marketing tools. I like a SEMrush or SEMrush,
Oh
however
yeah.
you want to call it.
Yep.
Um, and I really am still on the lookout for an awesome marketing automation tool. Or, I've dealt with several in my career, most recently Pardot, Marketo, etc. Quite frankly, I don't think any of them really hit the nail on the head right now. And I've done some custom
Mm-hmm.
work within Salesforce to build some like buying group kind of insights, kind of see what's going on and where our coverage is. Another thing that has to do with leads and how you take in a B2B space to take a product, even with Salesforce, that quite frankly, I think everyone goes for B2C more so, and try to customize it for B2B, and look at how you can see a picture on a finite number of
Mm-hmm.
potential opportunities with this. We are addressable market has just anybody and everybody that could buy the same thing 10, 12, 50 times.
Yep.
They could buy it once. Um, I haven't thought of the perfect tool out there for that yet.
I have not for a while, and they range in price pretty substantially
Oh yeah.
there. I think that's a
And complexity. I mean, some of them you can use
yes.
yourself, and others you got to hire a whole team. So I
Yeah.
think it's quite frustrating. There's some real opportunity for somebody to create something great there.
I'm sure someone's working on it right now, especially with the Gen AI stuff, to craft everything that's going on. and do all the optimization stuff. So if you're out there and you're working on it, I'd love to hear from you on that stuff.
Yeah,
But I
for
mean,
real.
I started my career in marketing automation when it was early days, but we focused on the Microsoft Dynamics ecosystem. That was the only place where we played, and so that was kind of our specialty. And it was definitely an interesting world back then. Kind of feels somewhat like Gen AI right now, a little bit of it was that early days of, hey, I can email people a lot more efficiently. Whether or not those emails were good was a different story. And then you had to educate sellers to say, don't go say I saw you were on the website, right? Like use the information, but don't be creepy with it. And I feel like we're kind of at that point with Gen AI today and maybe whatever the next marketing automation piece is. Just right now we're at the point where we can do a lot of things more efficiently. They may not be better. We can do them a lot more efficiently.
Right.
And so I think
And then,
we need to make that jump to where it actually works for us.
for sure. And then they're not necessarily marketing tools, but I live and die by Slack. I think that is one of the most user-friendly, easy to communicate back and forth in this
Yeah.
virtual environment that there is. I love that tool. Um, and there's something else I was thinking of, and I lost it. But whoa, ChatGPT. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I've fallen in love with that, and all the new GPTs that are on there on a regular basis to test and try. I just think the sky's the limit, and I'm constantly trying to spend time on it every week to educate myself on the possibilities. So I can't see myself living without that $20 a month version right now.
Yeah. I'd be curious, what are your top couple use cases you use it for? I know I use it for a lot of different things and having to train it with prompts and all that kind of stuff. But what are you finding yourself kind of doing on a regular basis with it?
You know, I've gotten it dialed in a couple of use cases where it can produce some pretty solid content. And you can even ask it to saturate for a certain number of keywords or capitalize on a certain number of keywords with the right prompt. But I think the more I go through a thread, I've learned how to sort of dial it in and get, sometimes half the battle is like, I know what I want to say. And if I
Yeah.
can just give it, like, here's what I want to say, and then it magically spit out, I'm like, yep, that's exactly how I would have written it if I was a professional writer.
Yes.
So I think that's pretty cool. Or sometimes you're like, I really want to write an article about X, Y, and Z. Give me a couple of ideas that have never been seen before. Things like
Right.
that. So I think I've spent most of my time around, content creation because, again, I've been in situations where we've been up against some pretty steep competition. So constantly looking over here at SEMrush and watching the numbers go up and down and working together with the team. And it became a really fun game of, ooh, we started to make some progress pretty quick and watch the Google algorithms change and, you're going to drop and then they go up and you're playing that game with Google and the competition on the content piece and using it for that. That's been a ton of fun.
There's a whole new disruption just coming on. What does SEO mean in the state of Gemini and generative
Yeah.
AI? Because right, it's auto-populating. You think about the surface area in the browser that's coming up there. So
Yep.
definitely an area marketers are going to have to, we got to figure out at some point here. But I think SEO still works, which is good.
Yeah.
So I know we're coming towards the end of our time here. I'd love to hear from you. If you had one piece of advice you could go back and give your younger self or give to a junior marketer just starting out today, what is that piece of advice?
Oh gosh, I don't know that I could just pick one, but there's a couple that come to mind. And the first one, came from my dad since I was really, really little. And I think the best piece of advice, and I used it my entire life, and that is never be afraid to ask because they just might say yes. And it is so true. Go into a restaurant and ordering something. Hey, do you think you could make that vegetarian? Do you think you can make that vegan or whatever, to
Mm-hmm.
big sort of business kinds of deals. As long as you're professional and you keep it authentic, never be afraid to ask for that raise. Never be afraid to ask, can you take on some more responsibility? Never be afraid to ask, hey, I've got this idea and I'd like to run it by you, or I'm looking for a mentorship. Never be afraid to ask. There are a lot of people that are just really afraid to ask.
Yes.
And it's kind of along that same lines of you miss every shot you never take.
Yeah.
So the worst thing that can happen is they can say no, but I can personally say throughout my entire personal and professional life, more times than not, you get the yes. And so that's what I would say to people.
I love that. I think it's also preparing yourself that it's okay if they do say no, right? Like
Absolutely.
just because you ask doesn't mean you're gonna get it. But to your point, more often than not, people will find a way to say yes. But I know I've encountered that with raises and things like that. Sometimes it's the rhythm of the business dictates whether or not I can do it right now or not. But hey, you know what? I know you asked, and I love that you're advocating for yourself. So those
Yeah.
kinds of things, I love it. Well, cheers once more on that. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
being on today. I know I learned a lot going through this and learned a little bit more about the healthcare ecosystem and fun trade show ideas actually coming out of it there. So we'll have to see if what people come up with next, and we'd love
Yeah.
to chat some more in the future.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Christy.
Have a great day. Bye.